Hi, welcome. My name is Donna Fordyce and I am the chair of the Pickering College Association, the PCA. Thanks for joining us. We're going to be talking today in our PCA speaker series to Elana Segal, and we're going to be talking about parenting in the digital age.
Hi, I'm Elana, and I'm a social worker. I've been practicing for just over 20 years. And in my practice, I see children, adolescents, young adults, and adults with a whole range of issues from anxiety, depression, family conflict, school issues.
As a therapist, can you give us more insight into the importance of human connection and how that specifically impacts the health of our children? What practical steps would you suggest to parents, for ourselves and for our families, to find balance with our technology and the best ways to ensure proper development for our children?
Human connection starts when we're born. It's the connection between babies, infants, and caregivers or parents. And kids experience the world through their parents, through observation, through mirroring, communication. So that connection is really important because it's the attachment that we form with our caregivers and our parents that give us a sense of confidence and a sense of safety and trust. It's a matter of parents being attuned to children so that children can emotionally self-regulate and build relationships with others. In terms of balance, it's up to parents to start to create norms and expectations in their homes around best practices with technology. Parents need to follow those expectations and norms as much as they expect their kids to, because as I said before, when kids are observing and mirroring, they're picking up on parents' behavior, and so it needs to be something that's expected around the home with everyone. So norms can look different in different families. It can be rules around no technology at the dinner table. It can be rules around the times that technology must get turned off in the evening, or the number of hours allowed on a device. That's going to be different depending on families' needs and ages and stages of children, and within families that might evolve. But it's all part of finding that balance so that parents and kids are spending the time necessary together.
As parents, we want our children to develop empathy and compassion, key markers for success in school, family, and work life. Catherine outlines how technology is negatively impacted the ability for our children to develop this neurological phenomenon. Can you give us some examples of how our children learn to develop empathy and compassion, and some suggestions on how parents can cultivate and nurture this trait in their children?
I think that it relates back to the last question, or the last answer, that when parents are attuned, then they create opportunities for empathy to develop. Kids need to have time with their parents to spontaneously understand the impact of their behavior on others and understand the impact of others' behaviors on them. And parents can be with their children and help them with that process. But if there's not that attunement and that connection, that's not going to happen. Empathy is about reflecting, thinking about the impact we have on others, reflecting on that, and understanding. And the concern with technology is that we have Snapchat and Instagram and instant messaging, and so we respond instantly. We don't give it thought. We don't give it consideration. And so parents can help kids first and foremost at home, giving thought, giving time to reflect and process. And then when kids move forward into a realm of technology, they're practiced and they can bring that with them.
Thank you. As parents of elementary children, how do we slow down the fast-forward tech phenomenon to allow our children to develop at an appropriate pace? What would be an important piece of advice to support proper development?
I think we need to let children play. There's not enough play happening today. because it's such a fast-paced world, and play allows for exploration, creativity, sparking imagination, curiosity. It allows us to navigate conflict and to share and produce together, and play needs to happen outside of the realm of technology. So I'm not talking about video games or anything like that. I'm talking about kids being together, being in nature together, being in situations where they can just play. And because it's such a fast-paced world, parents need to be mindful of carving out those opportunities for kids, letting them.
How much of the responsibility for the use of technology with our middle school children lies with parents, and how much lies with school? Based on your experience and your practice, where do you see an impact of technology of child development that is concerning to you?
Well, I think to answer the first question, it's both. I think that it's a partnership that has to happen, and often what happens in middle school is kids have increased responsibility, so the time that they're going to spend online is going to be greater than it was previously, because they're going to have homework, because they're going to have assignments, and also because their social world is going to expand and they're becoming a little bit more independent, so they're going to be socializing online more. And it's a great time for parents and schools to create an accountability with kids. We don't just hand over a car to someone and say good luck. We tell them that in order to operate this responsibly and effectively, there's certain rules and expectations that have to be followed. And I think it would be the same with technology as well. Because a lot of what happens online happens outside of the school realm, or it happens under the radar of parents and teachers. And so creating that accountability with kids and having a conversation with them about, you are now going to be using this more, but you are also accountable to what you're doing out there, is really important so that they get it. Over the last 20 years, I've seen a real shift, and I think there are two things that stand out to me in terms of the impact of technology. The first one is sleep. Sleep is greatly impacted because kids are on their phones till really late at night. And the problem with that is that it interrupts with the sleep process. Sleep is so important in terms of health and well-being. First of all, in terms of our moods. Second, in terms of our ability to function, our ability to focus, to remember. When kids are on their phones, sometimes people think that that's benign because it's a quiet experience if they're doing it in their bed. But any sleep expert will tell you that an hour before bedtime, all screens and devices must go off, because that backlighting is sending a signal to the brain that says daylight or not nighttime. And our brains need to send a signal that says nighttime. That's through the release of a hormone that happens. And when we have that backlighting, we don't give that opportunity to our brains. So that would be really important to think about for parents. The other thing that I see that happens, or that I've seen that's happened, is the enormous impact social media and the internet has on kids' sense of self. And there's so many ways that happens. There's two realities out there. There's the reality that we're living day to day, and then there's the reality that we create online. And kids create these personas of themselves online that take on lives of their own, so that we are functioning in the real world, and then we're posting things about ourselves or images that we'd like people to see us as, but we lose control of that very quickly, because as soon as someone posts something online, they're going to get comments and likes and responses, and it takes on a life. So even when we're not living that life, we're sitting in math class after we've put a post the night before, our virtual self is living without us. And that has an impact on kids because it's not a real self. And what they're seeing from other people isn't their real self. It's part of a self, but it's also a manipulation and a creation. And when kids try to aspire to that, or be as good as or as much as what they're seeing out there, then they're setting themselves up for an unrealistic standard. And the impact of that on their sort of sense of self and well-being has been huge. And that's something that didn't exist before the internet.
Is it feasible to think, expect, or enforce our teens to stop engaging through texting? Is that an answer? How do we approach and teach our children about how they are communicating, given that they cannot, cognitively, grasp the potential consequences of these communications?
It's not realistic to ask teens not to text anymore. I think the answer is no. I think it's part of their reality, and it's part of being in a social world. And in the same way that we used to talk on the phone, teens are texting. And the irony for me is that I used to spend hours on the phone, and it would be get off the phone from parents. I see a lot of kids and young adults who have anxiety in my practice, and so often they identify talking on the phone as something that makes them anxious and something that's difficult to do, because texting is the norm now. So we don't want to take that away from teens, because we don't want to take them away from their social world, and we want them to be connected to their friends. The flip side of that is that teens text on average approximately 1,000 texts a month. They send and receive. And when we look at the impact of that constant distraction when they're doing homework, when they're reading, when they're trying to focus on something, and what that does to the brain, that's concerning to me. So what do parents do? I would love to say, do this and you'll solve this problem, but I think the reality is that teenagers it's going to be difficult to start to say to teenagers, you need to stop texting, or you need to give up texting, or you need to limit texting, even just to say to limit it. But what parents can do is they can have a conversation with their kids, and they can talk to them about their concerns. Why are they concerned about the impact of texting, the distractibility factor? That you only have one brain and this is it, and so maybe you want to think about that when you're constantly being bombarded, so the kids can think about it themselves afterwards. That's the process of texting. But then there's the content of texting, which is the concerning messages that are sometimes out there, the hatred or the intolerance, sometimes the objectification of women or men. Even moving away from texting into just some of the things that kids are seeing online. And I think it's up to parents to have a conversation about that as well, to impart their value system and what their behavioral expectations are. And you might get rollback or pushback and eye rolls, and kids who are not really acting like they want to listen to you. But what happens is afterwards they can reflect on what you've said, and they can use it as a reference point. And the absence of that, of not having those conversations, leaves them in a void. So I would encourage parents to absolutely communicate concerns, and hope that with good judgment, kids will hear and process the messages that we're trying to impart to them.
How has technology influenced kids' understanding of intimacy, and what can parents do about that?
I think from a very young age, kids are coming into contact with information, sexual information, that is beyond their developmental stage. And I think that unaware parents might not realize the extent of this. But we need to clue in that this is out there, that kids are accessing it at a very young age. And what that creates is an objectification of boys and of girls. And how they want to see themselves and present themselves is informed by this. Because pornography isn't just about the porn sites, it's also informing the greater culture around us, whether it permeates advertising, whether it permeates music videos or movies, or just an expectation of how we're supposed to look and be. So then when it comes to intimacy and relationships, we get into the hookup culture. And this is such a big part of youth culture today. It's not about creating long-term connections. It's not about human connection. It's about fast and quick sexual pleasure. We need to talk to kids about this, and we need to capture them and capture their attention around this so that they understand what they're involved in, what's happening for them. We want them to have a greater perspective than they're actually getting just being out there on devices on their own, to understand the impact of hooking up and the impact of treating people a certain way because of a sexualized notion of them. And I don't think parents always feel comfortable doing that. And my advice to parents would be just open up those lines of communication, just have those conversations. Put it out there that you know that it's happening. Lots of kids are looking at pictures on the internet. Lots of kids are curious. Is that something that you know about? You don't have to ask them specifically if they're doing it or not, if that's going to be an uncomfortable consideration for you. But at least let them know that you know that it's out there. And then you can tell them what you think of it. Because if we don't spend the time as parents talking about these things, then kids will just proceed with the information that they get online. And they will think that that's the norm. And they will think that the things that happen sexually online that they're exposed to are what they're supposed to live up to. And in the same way we don't expect them to be violent the way they watch Batman or Superman, we don't expect them to engage in intimacy that isn't consenting and respectful and doesn't involve an emotional attachment.
Mm-hmm. The last chapter outlines many techniques and strategies and explanations of what a sustainable family looks like. What is your biggest piece of parenting advice you would like to share with our community?
Time. Absolutely. Make sure that you're giving your kids your time. We know that parents are working so hard and kids are programmed, and there's wonderful things going on in our lives. And so we have to start to wonder, when are we spending time with our kids? Are we having more than just the 5-minute check-in, how was your day? Great, how was mine? Versus really spending time together, breaking bread. How is your world? What's going on in the world? Really conversing and sharing. Because that, coming full circle, provides that human connection. That provides safety and security for kids to launch themselves into the world. And we want that. We want to make sure that those times are happening, and we want to make sure that those times continue.
Great, yes, all very good points. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.